Have you ever taken a photo that just seemed very off and not even editing could save it? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you a few examples of some of my earliest work, and I'm going to show you how you can avoid some common beginner mistakes in automotive photography. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Joe Granitto. I am an automotive photographer, and I've been posting on Instagram a lot here in the last year, and I've grown a lot as a photographer in the last 7 years that I have been doing this. And I want to share with you some of the common mistakes that I personally have made that many others make as well. We're going to start off with one of the biggest things I think people seem to have a hard understanding of, and that is composition. Composition of a photo is going to make or break your image no matter what it is that you are shooting. You can get super creative with your compositions, or you can be very generic with your compositions. Either way, composing your image in such a way to give it a very creative flair and also tell your story is super important. When it comes to cars, it's not like you're shooting a picture of a person. It's not like you're trying to get a really good landscape. You're taking a picture of an inanimate object. But composition of a car does matter. And it's because it's one of those things that people see every single day. So if you're taking a picture from the perspective of walking out to your car, it's not going to be that interesting. One of the easy tactics that you can use to compose your image in an interesting way is getting down low or going up high. When you're looking at a car and you take a picture, the way that you are standing, it's going to be a very generic photo. But if you put your camera lower or you put it higher, you're looking at the car from a perspective that you don't normally see. This makes it a little bit more interesting. You can also use the rule of thirds if you want, where it's composed right in the middle of the image, but I want to challenge you to compose it a little bit differently. Try putting it in the lower third of your image and shooting upward. You're going to get a much more dramatic look to your image, and you're also going to get a lot of negative space up top, but you can play around with that if you want. I personally have done this a few times, and I've gotten a lot more interesting photos. I like to do it with spoilers, and I also like to do it when I'm far away from the car and I'm shooting wide open at 24 millimeters. When you're going up top, if you're in a structure like a parking garage that has an overhang where you're able to look down, this is the easiest way to do it. You put the car beneath you, and then you go up top and you shoot straight down. A top-down shot is one of my favorite shots because you get this aerial view without the need of a drone. When you get that aerial view, you're looking at a very different perspective of this car, and it almost looks like a Hot Wheel on the floor. This is just something to kind of break up the normal, very generic images that you see of people's cars on social media. And so this is one of my most unique angles I like to get. Think about other things too, not even just like the angle of the car that you're looking at, but also what objects are around. One of my favorite things to do in parking garages specifically is using objects around the parking garage or structural features of that garage to frame up my subject. This could be a cutout in the wall. It can be a lamp that's sitting on top of the wall. It can be the electrical going to that lamp, or it can be some guardrails going across a walkway. Using objects like this in your foreground can compose your image of your car to make it look so much cooler than it normally would. Some generic angles that you can get that are still pretty cool angles are your head-on shots from the front or the rear, your side shots where you see the silhouette of the vehicle from the side, or you can do a 3/4 angle shot, which is you're looking at the front of the car, but it's at a 45-degree angle, and you turn the wheel. These kinds of shots seem very simple, but the way that you approach it is you should put yourself a little bit lower, and that way you get a much different perspective. Think of it like a 4-year-old holding your camera. Because they're so short, they're just gonna see it that much lower. That's actually pretty interesting. I should try that out. But composing your image is definitely something that a lot of people mess up on, and even myself, I still mess up on this every once in a while. But feel free to experiment. Find new ways to compose your image and just try it out. The next mistake that I want you to avoid is shooting in full auto. I know that seems a little bit weird, but let me explain. When you shoot in full auto, your camera is doing all the work for you. It's setting your exposure, which is your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO. And if you're not shooting in RAW and you're shooting JPEG, it's also doing a little bit of processing work on your image, which reduces the amount that you can do when you're editing. My recommendation is change your settings on your camera if you're using DSLR or a mirrorless camera to be a full manual mode. which means you set your aperture, you set your ISO, and you set your shutter speed. If that's something that you don't know how to do, don't worry, there's plenty of videos out there on YouTube, and if you're interested, I will gladly make my own video on how to set those 3 settings and what they all mean. And if your camera allows it, you want to shoot in RAW. The reason why is because RAW images give you the most flexibility when it comes to editing your photos. You have so much more room, you have so much more data, and it's also going to challenge you to be better at your editing. Whereas if you shoot in JPEG, the camera is doing some of the work for you. I know this seems kind of harsh, you know, if you're just starting out as a photographer, but trust me, this is going to help you learn that much faster. If I didn't shoot in full auto and if I didn't use JPEG images, I definitely would have learned a lot faster. Now, if you're shooting on a phone like an iPhone, I personally own a 15 Pro Max. A lot of phones now allow you to shoot in RAW. Just shoot in RAW. You can use whatever settings you want to use. You can also download some free apps that allow you to change your settings manually, like your shutter speed, ISO, and aperture. You can always look for stuff like that where you can take photos that way, and then you can learn how to edit on your phone. Every camera is different, so if you want to learn how to shoot RAW or you want to know how to use your manual settings on your camera, look it up on Google or on YouTube, whatever your camera model name is, and then type in manual settings or RAW. Another common mistake I see people have is with their lighting. Lighting is literally the bread and butter when it comes to photography. And if your lighting sucks, your image is gonna suck, no matter how good your camera is. When it comes to automotive photography, I like to pick early morning or early evenings, specifically golden hour. Golden hour is simply the hour leading from sunrise or leading up to sunset. This is when the lighting's gonna be less harsh, it's gonna be so much nicer on the eyes, and your images are gonna look so much more cinematic. It's not always the case that you can go out and you can shoot during these times, depending on your schedule. I also sometimes don't do that and I just shoot in broad daylight, but my recommendation is if you're shooting in broad daylight, find some shaded area so that way you don't have all these harsh lights hitting your car, or if you have a filter that is a black mist filter, use that because that is definitely gonna help soften those highlights. But also if you're shooting in a dark environment, like maybe it's pitch black outside, find somewhere with a little bit of light. Even if it's just a street light that's emanating some white light, or if you're in a parking garage, find anywhere that's gonna have enough light for you to actually get a picture of the car. If you don't have access to that kind of stuff and you have an external light like a flash, use a flash. But if you just crank up your ISO or you crank down your aperture to the lowest that you can do, sometimes that's not even enough. Another mistake I see people do is not using what's called a circular polarizer filter. And actually I should grab one real quick. As an example, this is a circular polarizer filter that I have from PolarPro. This is one that I have personally used for quite some time now. And before that, I've used other brands before, but all polarizers do the same thing. And that is cut out reflections from your paint or from your windows. They also enhance your sky too whenever you spin them. But basically, I'll show you on screen 2 different images. One is going to be without a polarizer filter and one will be with a polarizer filter. Polarizer filters come in various sizes from various companies and at various prices. I recommend purchasing one that fits within your budget. You can also get other styles of circular polarizer filters that have other effects on it. Like for instance, I am shooting with a polarizer filter that is also a black mist filter. And these two combined really help with harsh lighting situations like broad daylight. It softens your highlights and it also cuts reflections out at the same time. If you're curious, all the filters I use will be linked in the description below. They are all from the same brand, PolarPro, and this is by no means a sponsored video. Another common mistake I see people do in automotive photography is not getting enough detail shots. Now this is probably not a well-known thing, but a lot of times you see people take pictures of cars from far away, where you're getting the entirety of the car in frame and you're getting a lot of these different angles from the front, the side, the rear, etc. But what makes a car different is in the detail. And what do I mean by detail shot? A detail shot is going to be a characteristic of the car that you don't normally look at. That can be the wheels, it can be the logo on the car, maybe the person personalized it with something like a sticker or the interior looks slightly different, but no 2 cars are going to be the exact same. So I think it's important that you go around the car, look for anything that you can get a detail shot of, and actually focus on it when you're composing your shot. This is something that's very simple, and honestly, it's overlooked quite often, but I personally love detail shots. They're some of my favorite photos I take. And the last mistake that I want to touch on is more of a personal thing, but stop comparing yourself to others. I know a lot of people starting out in photography look at some of the people they've been looking up to for however long, and they think, oh, I want to be just like them. Like, I want to shoot the kind of cars that they shoot. I want to do the kind of edits that they do. But in reality, those people didn't get there right away. Like, they had to build up to that point. Anybody you see out there that has been doing this for a while has had a lot of opportunity and a lot of growth in order to get there. So you starting out, if you're seeing a photo posted by North Borders himself, you know, like that's one of the people I've looked up to over the years. You say, oh man, I want to edit just like him. Like you can get to the point where you can edit like another photographer, but when you go out and you take your first photo and you start comparing it to another person and you say to yourself, wow, I'm not cut out for this. That is a huge mistake. That is something that you need to stop doing because it's only going to hurt you creatively in the long run. So if you want to edit like another photographer that you look up to, definitely try to implement some of their same style. But ultimately what's going to end up happening is you're going to mold it into your own style, which is completely normal. So comparing yourself early on to other photographers is completely useless because eventually you're just going to edit differently than them anyways. So might as well just try and find your own path early on. Definitely take inspiration from other photographers, but never look at it and say, wow, I'm never going to be good like them, because that's not true. So these are some of the most common mistakes that I wanted to cover with you today. If there are other common mistakes that you personally have seen, leave a comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give a thumbs up and also consider subscribing if you want to see more videos like this in the future. That is all I have for you right now for today. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.